Written by Dr.Yaşam Ayavefe.
What are literature review steps? Step 1. Research similar studies for a well-structured literature scan. Whether you are an experienced researcher or a student who has just started a graduate or doctoral program for a quality literature scan, it is important to have a thorough knowledge of the literature scans and the subject to be reviewed. Let me immediately point out that the basic works in the literature are not scanned and the texts in the literature are copied into the study, but rather a deep domination of the main theme. Step 2. Include literature gaps and theories. Despite its importance, the literature review department can be ignored as a basic point. In many cases, authors can ignore that for a good literary scan, they should include their own perspectives on the subject and provide a detailed review, the benefits and gaps of existing research and the need to fully rank reasonable solutions to overcome these gaps. In this regard, it is necessary to highlight the gaps in the current literature and highlight what kind of contribution the study will make in filling these gaps. Even if there are certain gaps that research cannot complete, they should still be included and emphasize their outline for later work. Finally, writers should make sure that they have not overlooked the most effective theories and most recent studies in the relevant field when they are scanning literature and make sure that they include them. Another important thing to emphasize in this section is the emergence of inconsistencies in different theories. Step 3. Systematically organize your literature scan. To ensure consistency between consecutive sentences and facilitate tracking, divide the literature scan section into multiple subsections. You can do this grouping chronologically or thematically. It is simpler to do the literature scan chronologically and aims to track the temporal development of the subject. The thematic outline aims to define the distinguishable patterns between different research studies and to divide them into multiple subclasses and discuss them in this context. Step 4. Clearly determine the extent of the literature scan. Since it is impossible to include a summary of all studies in a particular area in your work, you should clearly determine the scope of the literature scan and express it in your work. This will allow an editor, referee, or reader audience who will read your work to know that you have sufficient awareness of the area and that you have not overlooked the related subtopics carelessly or unwittingly, and that you have a brief field dominance. Step 5. Avoid plagiarism for a quality literature scan. For a perfect literature scan, it is important that any information used in the study be included in the text reference list, the original source. Whether they are intentionally or unintentional, it is useful to be treated with extreme caution as failure to quote will lead to an act of plagiarism and serious sanctions will occur. Expressing the original text in other words, sharing some interesting data or statistics as if it were the person's own, is sometimes tempting, but the use of the sentences in the quoted source by changing them does not take it away from being an act of plagiarism. Note that if your work has been identified as a plagiarism, you may even be subject to the rejection of your article from the beginning, or even the sanctions of losing your academic position or title. To do this, it is important to make appropriate references to the resources you place in the text as well as to the reference style, for example, APA style, in the reference list. You can also find the following articles about the initial useful. Step 6. Note the language you use. Authors should pay attention to the language they use when contradicting another author's opinion or emphasizing gaps in their methodology. The deficiencies in other studies should be summarized and put forward objectively, selectively, and most importantly without prejudice. This basic rule is useful for experienced researchers, as well as new researchers, and if followed seriously, it will result in a very thorough review of the current literature in the field. Step 7. Get editing or proofreading before publishing. After you have finished your literature scan, be sure to edit or proofreading according to the situation and correct possible English language errors in the study before sending your work to the broadcast. Once you have completed the literature review of your English article, the errors and content audit you have overlooked by an English language expert will make your work perfect. You'll be surprised to see how many mistakes you've ignored after you've received a revised version of your work. Academic editing and proofreading services are very important at this point. As we often emphasize, the ability to write English and academic skills are completely different. There's a lot of unquestionable situations where even distinguished academics and researchers can't write well. It is completely different for an academic to write impeccable text with a very good level of English grammar or high-level academic competency. He could be a field expert who made a reputation in the field of an academic, who contributed a lot to science. But that doesn't make him a great writer. Because these are things that require completely different skills. Best Edit VE Proofs customers also have a PhD degree in English with a large number of major languages, which is proof. The Academic Editing Service, English Spelling and Content Control, and Proofreading Service, English Spelling Check, are one of the most important needs to achieve success in English written academic works. Because taking advantage of these services will ensure that your article or academic work reaches its maximum potential and that the academic quality of the work increases. Editing and proofreading services will also increase the possibility that your article will be published in academic referee journals.
Written by Dr. Yaşam Ayavefe.